I'm starting to get really anxious. It is mid-October, late October actually, and the rains are going to be here in less than a month. We've been waiting all year for the rains. I live in California, and I have not done my yard cleanup, prepped any of my beds, or planted cover crops yet. So I really need to get to it. Please tell me I'm not alone. Now, just because your garden is not producing so much for you by way of fruits and vegetables during the winter months does not mean that you should neglect it completely. In fact, you do need to try whatever means you can to keep the life in the soil going. And there are various ways to do it, but most of them involve covering the soil. Now, when we talk about covering soil, it's really important to pay attention to how nature does it, because really nature does it best. And there are two primary ways by which nature covers the soil. The first is by dropping leaves in fall. Now, my gorgeous oak trees have just started dropping their leaves, and in a little bit, this entire place is going to be covered with a thick layer, probably 6 inches of leaves or more if I let them. And frankly, I do let them. I kind of sweep them off the pathways, but I let them cover all of this space, which right now is heavily mulched. Now, aesthetically, this might not be the most pleasing thing to look at, but frankly, it is better than the alternative. And the alternative is nature planting what we call weeds. But for nature, it's a cover crop. And that's why in the spaces where you don't want weeds, you need to either mulch heavily or plant cover crops. Oh, and I have one additional problem. If I do not plant cover crops and I leave the soil bare, guess who's going to plant cover crops in addition to Mother Nature? My squirrels. Yep, I've got acorns, oak trees growing all over my garden. So I've got my gloves and I've got my clippers, because the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be cleaning out all the plants from this bed. And I've got some perennials growing here. I've got some cannas, some alocasia, some kale. I'm going to chop them all down to the base. The kale will grow back in winter, but the cannas and the alocasia, they're not going to be doing very much until the weather warms up. So let's go ahead and do some cleanup. I know it's hard to tell, but this thing is looking so much better already. The next thing to do is water it in properly. So I've watered it all in, and I could frankly actually just get started planting my cover crops directly in this, but I've noticed a lot of ups and downs in the soil, so I'm just going to cover it with a layer of topsoil just to give something good for the cover crops to adhere to. Okay, that's good enough. Let's reinstall the irrigation and then we'll plant our cover crops. Okay, so we got our irrigation all set up and I've got my bag of cover crops. And let's talk briefly about the benefits of cover crops. Now, I've got what's called a soil builder, premium soil builder mix. This is from groworganic.com, and I really love their products. They've got so many varieties of cover crops. The one that I've got is primarily for adding nitrogen to the soil. You can see things like bell beans, field peas. It's got some biomass building cereal rye, and a lot of things that will really result in good, high quality soil building opportunities for many of my beds, which are very heavy in clay. Now, you can get various different types of cover crop mixes. You've got the cover crop mixes where they actually dig into hard clay and loosen it up. You've got the legume fixing one, like I've got over here. You've got cover crops that build biomass, and those are mostly cereal grain type stuff. All of them grow really, really quickly, and when you chop them down, they will add a lot of that green material to the soil. And then you've also got things like erosion control. In places where you've got lots of rain, you want to be able to actually hold on to the soil as much as possible. So cover crops that really produce those fibrous roots that hold the soil together. So as you can see, there are a huge amount of benefits that can be gained, and you can get your own almost custom mix depending on what you want to do for your soil. Now you can make your own cover crop mix. I actually jumped into my pantry. We use a lot of legumes and pulses in our Indian cooking, so I grabbed some peas and some chickpea and lentils, all kinds of stuff, and just sort of threw it around. That works really well. But I find that these mixes that you buy, you get a lot of variety that you normally don't stock in your pantry, and frankly they're not that expensive. I think this, including shipping, came up to roughly $5 a pound. So if you've got not a very large garden, 1 or 2 pounds will go a long way. And there are also various ways that you can plant these cover crops, and especially these leguminous mixes might benefit from you adding an inoculant. You can purchase those, and all you do is you soak it in a little bit of inoculated liquid for a while, and then you plant with it. Now, I find that I don't really need that. I've grown leguminous cover crops before, and they develop nice nodules on their roots. So I think my soil already has those inoculants in it. But if you feel that you're kind of just getting started, that might be beneficial to do. The other thing also that a lot of people do, and I've done in the past, is soaking this for a while before you plant it out. So it really absorbs that moisture and plumps up nicely. Now, I'm not going to be doing that mainly because it kind of sticks to your fingers. It's difficult to spread. I'm going to just be using the broadcast method. The disadvantage of the broadcast method is that you have to keep it moist. And if you're not getting rains, and we're not going to get rains for a few weeks, you have to keep coming and watering it. But that's what I'm choosing to do. You can choose to soak it. That will work perfectly fine. Now, you do want to plant these pretty densely together. You do not want to follow spacing rules for peas, planting them 3-4 inches apart. No, you actually want to sow them on pretty thick, because they're going to be covering the soil. They're going to be smothering weeds that are going to be growing in there. They're going to be protecting the soil, creating that soil life under the surface. So you really want to sow it on thick. You can either go in furrows, maybe about 4 inches apart, and sow thickly in the furrows, or you can just do what I'm doing, which is, ta-da! I'm just going to be broadcasting them everywhere and kind of eyeballing just to see that I've got sufficient coverage. So just to give you an idea, this is how densely I'm sowing it. So roughly like that should be good enough. So let's water it in one more time. Now you want to water these in really well and use some force to kind of get the seeds in here. You can actually use a rake to kind of get them into the soil, but I'm actually going to be using one more layer of compost on top of this. So I'm just going to water these in. And finally, because I've got squirrels which will dig up and eat the seeds as well as totally mess up this whole bed, I'm going to be covering it. You can use row cover, you can use any kind of mesh. But yeah, if you have critters, I mean, look how beautiful that is. Isn't it the perfect place for a kitty to use as a litter box? Don't want that. This is actually swimming pool fencing that we used to use when the kids were little. It has come in so handy for all kinds of things over the years. Nice thing about it is it will let water through because it's a fine mesh. You can use chicken wire. Really, it depends on the kinds of pests that you have, but this thing works really great for me. Okay, so we're done planting up our cover crops, and in about a week or so, you should see these starting to sprout. Keep it well watered. Until then, at least I've got my irrigation, so it should be good. But I'll come every once in a while and also squirt with some water because the irrigation doesn't go everywhere, and I want as many seeds as possible to germinate. Now, these grow really, really fast. So you've got to time it so that you terminate the cover crops about maybe 2 to 3 weeks, a little bit more, before you're ready to plant in them. Because if you want to let them sit and decompose on your soil, you got to give them some time. You also want to make sure that you terminate cover crops as soon as you see them starting to flower and produce seed, because especially the leguminous cover crops, they're going to pull all of that wonderful nitrogen that they've stored in those nodules and put them into growing those flowers and seeds. And you don't want that. You want it to be in the soil. So terminate it as soon as you see those first blossoms starting to happen. And if you want to know how I terminate cover crops, I've got various ways that I've shared in this video.